Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ruth Ann, and I'm from Abundant Blooms Flower Farm in Dorr, Michigan, Zone 6. I'm in my 6th year of flower farming, and here on my channel we talk all things selling flowers to florists, all things a farm from the perspective of selling to florists. Today, in this video, we are going to talk about peonies, and there's going to be a two-part video, and I'm trying not to squint, and the sun, I think, is going to move. Or it's moving, and it'll be better in just a little bit, but right now, I am not complaining because we do not get a lot of sunshine in Michigan in the winter, so there are no complaints about a little bit of sunshine. So I'm coming to you from my hoop house because this is my favorite place to be in the winter. It's very energizing, and there's even green things here. And I have automatic sides that can't decide if they want to be up or down, so you'll see them going up and down in this video. So today we are going to talk about peonies. This is going to be in two parts. So today we're going to talk about how to grow them, when to plant them, how to plant them, how many years to maturity and maintenance and that kind of thing. And my favorite varieties. And then in the next video we're going to talk about correct harvest stage and how to store them and pricing and that kind of stuff. So we are just going to get right to it. But first, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please subscribe. It's free. It's really exciting to me. It really helps me. And it's been a really fun journey on YouTube. So thank you to everyone that has subscribed. And if you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button and download my free tips for selling flowers to florists. That is the link in the description. And then you'll be signed up for my email and you'll never miss a thing. And you'll get these really great free tips about how you can start selling flowers to florists and give you tips on how to do that. Okay, so to get right into peonies, we're going to do a little synopsis on my peony journey. So I started my farm in 2020. I didn't sell a whole lot that year, but it was the first year it was officially a farm, and I sold $1,000 worth, and I didn't sell to florists. So 2021, I knew that at the end of that year, my big purchase was going to be peonies, which is lovely because you can plant them in the fall, and that's when you have more money. So that's helpful. So I did that, and I planted 120 peonies in 2021. So now it's 2025, so they're going into their fourth spring. I actually had more ordered, and part of my order got canceled. So I was hoping to plant, I think, 150. So then the next spring, 2022, I planted 50 more. And then in 2023, I planted another 150. So I'll get into all the varieties, but just so you kind of have a little idea of when I started my peony journey and how that's gone. I'm going to try and just kind of go systematically through peony journey here. So when do you plant them? Okay, so the best time to plant them is in the fall. If you didn't plant them in the fall, alternatively, you can plant them in the spring. Planting them in the spring is better than waiting till that fall again if you have the opportunity. So either spring or fall really is better. And by fall, I mean as long as you can dig the ground. That's when you can plant them. I will put a picture up. I was due with my 5th baby on November 2, I think. No, November 10 or 11, somewhere around there. And I was planting peonies on my due date in the beginning of November. I always go a week late, so don't worry, the baby didn't come that day, although I was trying. So yes, you can plant peonies in the fall as long as you can dig the soil, and you can plant them 9 months pregnant. It's okay. It gets a little old on your hands and knees, but it works. Okay, so fall or spring. So how to plant them. So you want, when you get the peony plant, which I will show pictures of, you will see eyes on the peony plant. They should be pretty easy to distinguish. And you want the closest eye to the soil to be 2 inches below the soil. So you kind of plant them on a plane, sort of, with their roots they're typically a bare root, by the way, that you're planting for cut flowers. You're usually planting bare roots. And so you're going to plant it on a plane, level, and then you're going to cover it with 2 inches of soil. You do not want to cover it with a lot of soil. You also do not want to mulch them every year and put wood chips or some kind of mulch on top of them, because you're going to be burying them deeper and deeper. And if they're buried too deep, they will not bloom. So you don't want to plant them too deep. So that's how you plant them. I have taken an auger attached to my electric drill and kind of, drilled holes in my soil. I have kind of clay soil. not like the softest, nice. I don't have sand, nice loamy soil by any means. So, we're typically like, chipping out soil in any way you can the fastest. So that's how you do it. And I don't fertilize them or anything when I plant them. I have planted them in landscape fabric, where I've burned like an X in the landscape fabric and planted into the landscape fabric. And then I planted them on a diagonal, and I planted them every 18 inches apart. So 18 inches like on diagonal. So then you've got 2 rows of them down a 3-foot bed, 18 inches apart, diagonally across the bed. And I planted them into landscape fabric that way, burning holes into landscape fabric. I have also planted them in a straight row, and I still plant them like 20 inches apart, 18 to 24 inches apart, and planted them without landscape fabric. And then I cut pieces of cardboard and put cardboard in between the plants, and then put wood chips on top of the cardboard. And then you just have to make sure you're not piling the wood chips on top. Or what you can do is in the fall, you can pull the wood chips off. So they can be mulched for the summer, but in the winter they can't be mulched or they won't bloom. So you don't want them, like I said, you don't want to pile up mulch on top of them, wood chips, leaves, whatever, because they won't bloom. So when I buy roots, I always want at least 3 to 5 eye. I prefer like 5 to 7 eye is really better. So I would look for 5 to 7 eyes myself, unless I wasn't able to. Yes, the roots are going to be more expensive, but they're going to give you a more robust, hardier, healthier, bigger plant sooner, and they're not that much more expensive. On the low end, $5 wholesale, and on the high end, like $30, but I don't buy anything crazy. So most of my plants, my roots are from $5.50, maybe $6 now to $10. If I buy anything like 12, that's got to be pretty special for me to spend that much money on a root. So just a little bit of pricing on the bare root itself. Of course, this is wholesale pricing that I'm talking about. Often these are coming in crates of at least 25, if not 50 roots of each variety. So yes, I'm buying them wholesale in quantity. From Ball, typically Ball Seed. I'm pretty sure that's where I've gotten all my peonies from. The first year or two, you really need to weed your peonies. It's just, you're just going to have a lot of weeds because your plants are going to be really small, like really small. And the weeds are going to really come in and enjoy themselves around the peonies. No matter what you do, whether you've got landscape fabric, you are going to have to weed those holes because you need a decent size hole because your root is a decent size. So you're going to have to weed them. The other thing is they don't really love wet feet. Now, I mentioned I have clay soil, so I have either planted them in a better drainage area of my farm on like a slope or on higher ground if possible, or I have planted in raised beds. Like in the one area, it's actually pretty wet in the spring particularly. And so I built raised beds several years ago. This is my first planting. So several years ago, I built the raised beds, and they do great. I did lose a couple of them. Potentially that was to root rot, but I did not lose a substantial amount of them. I don't know, maybe out of 120, I lost 7 or 8. So a few, but not a ton. You can definitely plant them in raised beds. And if you have drainage issues, I would highly recommend starting out that way, because it's not really preferable to move a peony once it's planted. It's possible, not preferable. Plant them if you know you don't have great soil, or you know you don't have great drainage, plant them into raised beds before you have a problem. So then the next question is, how do I fertilize, or when do I fertilize? So I fertilize them in the spring, early spring, like March. I can actually already see little prawns of my peonies coming up, certain varieties. And so you want to, get them fertilizer in the early spring when they're going to need it. And then I also fertilize them again in July. So in July and August, they're setting their eyes for the following year. So if you have a drought in July and you haven't watered your peony plants, you're probably not going to get a very good crop the next season. So don't forget about your peonies. They're probably not going to die. I mean, potentially they could if it was really severe, but now my vents are closing. The plant itself is probably not going to die, but it will not be able to give energy to the roots in order to produce flowers the following spring. So if you're having, good peonies, and then one spring you're wondering, well, why don't I have as good a crop as I did last year? Think about, did I have a drought in July and August? Did I water my peonies? And that might give you a clue. So don't forget about them. I keep mine on drip. Most of them are on drip, or I have one section that's not on drip, but it's all together. And then I just have to remember and think, okay, do I need to irrigate them? And then I put sprinklers on them. And then in the fall, you just cut them back to the ground, or 1 inch from the ground, so that you just cut all the foliage back. And in the fall, they get a disease, or at the end of the season, they start to get diseased in their leaves. I'm trying to think what it's called. It's not powdery mildew. It's the other thing, which I'm totally blanking. I will put the name up. But so you don't want to keep that foliage. You don't want to compost that foliage. You don't want to get that spread anywhere else on your farm. So you want to cut it completely down to the ground and either trash it or burn it. You do not want to compost peony foliage. Pretty much, I'm pretty sure it's pretty standard. People don't do that because there's this very common disease, botrytis. Is that what it is? Botrytis at the end of the season. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. So just cut them down, trash them, or we typically burn them. We just let them dry for a little bit and burn them. And that's all you have to do, just cut them down. So, and then in the spring, just to kind of give you an idea of when they mature. So I live in zone 6A in Michigan. So typically they're maturing for us end of May, early June. June is really the peony month here. If you will get some early ones in May, or if you have an early spring at the end of May, you'll get them. But we definitely do not have peonies for Mother's Day ever. Local peonies in Michigan. So they mature. That's when they mature for us. So certain places of the country, maybe this is a great Mother's Day flower. For Michigan, no, it's not. It's never in bloom for Mother's Day. Tulips are in bloom for Mother's Day here. Maybe, usually. Unless you miss it by a week. There's a lot of plants that you'll hear oh, this plant blooms with peonies. This blooms with peonies. So it sort of gives you a gauge instead of saying, oh, it blooms in early June. Well, that's really dependent on where in the country you are. So for me, I know Aromaris blooms with peonies, or, a certain perennial, you would say it blooms with peonies. It's going to bloom right after peonies, something like that. So it kind of gives you a judge based on how you're going to be able to determine the crops in your location, as opposed to how it'll bloom. Okay, the other great thing, so why are peonies great, or why should you invest in them? Why are they important? So, well, there's one thing that I really like, is that it's a perennial that just keeps on giving and giving. You never have to divide it. In fact, it's advised not to move them, not to divide them. You can, but it's not really preferable. You can set them back. You can just damage them, but you can. But the goal for me has always been to plant it and leave it, and the older the peony gets, the better and better it gets. So you can have peonies live for 100 years. They literally will live forever if they're well cared for and they have good drainage, and they're not going to rot or something. And you give them minimal care, but if you give them some basic minimal care, they'll live 100 years, which is totally true. People talk about grandma's peony plants that have been there forever, and that's totally a thing. At least in Michigan, maybe not everywhere, but for here, for sure. And not only that, but every year they will send it more and more shoots. So I don't have any peonies like this, but if you have really established peonies, you can get 50, 60 stems off of one peony plant. So if you have a peony plant that's 20 years old, they're going to give you some awesome stems. I've been keeping track of my stems on my peonies and how old they are. And I was getting, and it is variety dependent. I will tell you, the coral charms give me the least amount of shoots, 5 to 7, as opposed to my Duchess de Numenors are giving me 20 to 25 off of plants that are the same age, the 2021 planted ones. So definitely there can be some variance based on variety. So, and the other thing about spring maturity is that the single stems, the single petals always mature first. At least I'm pretty sure that's pretty standard. But so coral charm, soft salmon saucer, the ones that are single petaled instead of the really ruffly double ones, they always mature later. So the single ones are going to mature first. So that can help you. So there are early, mid, and late peonies, and so it's helpful to know that when you're planning out your field, because pretty much all your peonies are going to bloom at the same time, and we're going to talk about this in the next video, but they take a lot of maintenance to pick, and it's like a full-time job for the 2 weeks that they're in bloom. So if you can kind of have early ones, mid, late, you're going to spread it out a little bit and help yourself out a little bit and give you just a little bit different window of peonies. So that can be helpful. Okay. I feel like this is kind of debated in the cut flower world, and people say, oh, you can do it this way, or oh, you can do it that way, or you shouldn't do this, you should never do that, you have to do it this way. You can't harvest a peony for 5 years or something, or you can harvest them the first year. I've heard it all. So I'm not necessarily out here to hotly debate this in the comments, but I'm going to tell you what I've done and what my experience has been and who I got advice from. So basically I did it the way Dave Dallion says, and that's worked for me. I think I'm proving that. I'm going into my 4th year, so I can tell you what a peony looks like in year 1, 2, 3. And I actually have several peony plants on the side of my house that have been there for since 2018. So I have 3 older bushes that are sort of in my landscaping, except I always cut them now. But so I can look at those peony plants that are now 7 years old, going into their 8th season. So, and I've definitely been tracking them also. So I can speak a little bit to an older peony bush and compare it. So what I have done is, yes, there is some research out there that says you shouldn't cut a peony plant till its 4th season or 3rd season or 2nd season, or some people say you can cut them in their 1st season. So we'll get into that. And Dave Dallion says, yes, the older you leave the plant, the more mature it's going to be, and the more it's going to have a better root system. So yeah, waiting 4 years would be the perfect scenario and how you do it. However, you could be dead in 4 years, right? You don't know what's going to happen in 4 years. And in the meantime, you could be making money off of it. So this is what I have done. In year 1, literally my peony plants are 18, maybe 12 to 18 inches tall. They have these 3 little prongs. They hardly even give you a bloom. You might get 1 or 2 blooms out of literally 150 plants. You might get a few blooms, maybe 0 to 1 per plant, okay? So I don't know how anybody, no matter how ambitious they are, can harvest and sell peonies off of a first-year peony plant. I just don't think that it's possible. And one important thing to know about peonies is peonies get their energy from their leaves. So the more leaves that you leave on a peony plant, the more food it has, the more surface area it has to photosynthesize and put energy back into its roots, producing more eyes, and the eyes are what produces the stems, which produces the blooms for the following season. So if anybody tells you can harvest off of peonies, you plant them in the fall and you harvest them the next spring, I think they're crazy. I think that's from over 300 peony plants that I've planted, that's never, ever, ever been possible. So I don't think that's possible. So year 2, I would say, is hotly debated. So here's what I would do. Yes, you can pick peonies off of a 2-year-old plant. And by that I mean you planted it in the fall of 2021. So in the spring of 2022, you're not picking it. And in the spring of 2023, this is now its 2nd year. I have had a comparison because I've had peonies in their 2nd year and in their 3rd year. So yes, peonies do send up, the bushes are majorly different than they are in year 1. They're much bigger, and they're maybe giving you 2 to 4 blooms per plant. So what some people say is they pluck off, and this is what I would also do in year 1, is snip or pick off the blooms when they're pretty small, because otherwise the plant is putting a lot of energy into creating that bud. So when the buds are really tiny, you just crack them off with your thumb and forefinger. You just kind of take them out, which is what I do in the first year as well. I might leave just 1 or 2 blooms on a couple of plants because, it's good to know, did I get the right variety from the wholesaler? Or is this what I'm expecting it to be? So that can be helpful. That's not necessarily wrong, but I would mostly pluck off the blooms in year 1. In year 2, what I did initially was I plucked off half of them. So if unless the plant looked sad or didn't look that great, then I would take off all the blooms, all the buds, And otherwise, like if it had 4 pretty nice looking buds, I would just pick 2 and take off 2. Let's just use that as an example. So if there were 4, I took off half of them, and then I would cut those stems and sell them. That's what I did. Then I went into year 3 of peonies, and I also had 3rd year peonies and I had 2nd year peonies. And I am telling you, those 3rd year peonies are bigger, better, more, taller, stronger, everything. And so then I'm selling wholesale, and I was like, well, I don't really want to sell these 2nd year peony buds next to these, or 2nd year peony blooms, which are harvested in, bud stage essentially. And I don't want to sell these compared to these 3rd year peony blooms, because the 3rd years are so much superior to the 2nd year blooms. So I would say, if you have a roadside stand, if you're selling retail, go for it. The 2nd year, if you feel comfortable with that, I would still definitely cut off like half the buds. I think that is really important to giving it a robust future. But you could use some of the blooms. And then don't cut the stems too long, because the peony is rejuvenated by its leaves. So if you cut a 30-inch stem, because you can, because you're cutting it to the ground, you're taking off all those leaves that potentially you could leave some of them. So if you need an 18-inch stem, cut an 18-inch stem. Don't cut a 24-inch stem, and always seek to cut it above a set of leaves, giving yourself the longest stem length up to that set of leaves. And I know I mentioned this in a past video, but I measure, so from my fingertips to my anacubical, or like my elbow, is 18 inches. And so if I'm going for a 24-inch stem, I know I just need to go a little higher than my elbow, or I'm really trying to cut my peonies 18 to 20 inches even now, because most people don't need a taller peony stem than that. If I had a florist that really did need that, I would coordinate that directly and cut them longer stems. But you don't just want to cut a longer stem. Now, I usually cut them 20 inches because I'm dry storing them, and then when you put them back in water, you're going to cut an inch off the stem, and so you are going to lose some stem length. So you need to be aware of that as well if you're storing them. But just be careful with your stem length, and don't cut them any longer than you absolutely need them to be. Okay, so then in year 3, what do? Well, in year 3, if the plant looks robust, I let all the buds go, and then I harvest them. And even when doing that, letting all the buds go into bloom, compared to a year 2 bloom, it's superior. It's bigger. It's more robust. It's just a better plant. So you do what you think is appropriate for your farm. But if anybody tells you like, oh, you can cut off 1st year peonies, I don't really think that's possible. If they also say, oh no, you must wait 5 years, is that beneficial? Yeah, it is beneficial to the plant. Is it absolutely necessary? Not in my experience. 2nd year peonies, I feel like going forward, I probably will either not harvest off of them, and will harvest extremely cautiously off of them. And I just find them really inferior to the 3rd year peonies. Now I'm going to talk about the varieties that I've grown. So like I said, I started in 2021 with 120 plants, 120 peonies. Year 2022, 50 more were added. 2023, 150 more were added. So I'm up to, roughly 320, but I have lost a few. So, just over 300. I was 310, somewhere right in there, right? Okay, so pretty much standard in the cut flower industry, there's kind of 5 mainstay peonies, and those would be Sarah Bernhardt's, Duchess de Numenor's, Mons Julie, Coral Charm, and Kansas. So I have all of those planted. I have also heard people say, Dave Dallion says this, like plant double the amount of Sarah Bernhardt's. That's the one that everybody wants. So if you have 100 peonies, 50 of them, or let's say you have 20 of each variety, you should have 40 Sarah Bernhardt's. So I have a lot of Sarah Bernhardt's because I took that advice. I have not found them to be my biggest seller. And I think it will kind of depend on your market. So who are you selling to? So I sell to wedding and event florists and florists. So first of all, my brick and mortar florists don't buy a lot of peonies here in Michigan. Everybody has peonies in their yard. Their grandma has an old plant. A lot of my small brick and mortar florists actually harvest, one of them in particular has old peony plants in her yard. And like I said, you don't need a lot of them. They really produce a lot. So she has a couple peony plants in her in her gardens, and she cuts her own and sells them in her shop, which is really smart because peonies aren't cheap. And so if you had some there that you were able to if you had some that you were able to harvest and you knew a little bit about flowers, so I would do that for my shop too. So she never buys peonies from me in season, like when they're actually blooming here in Michigan, but pretty much as soon as they stop and she doesn't have them on her plants anymore, then she buys them for me, and she'll also buy them for me for weddings. And then I have another florist, and she's like, nobody wants those around here, everybody has them in their yard. So for me in Michigan, when the peonies are blooming, most of my brick and mortar florists don't buy them, but it's a couple weeks later they still want them. But then by like the end of June, they're like, nah, they're like out of season. Nobody's really into peonies now, unless there's a wedding. Because if there's a wedding and somebody wants peonies, that's where you're going to sell a lot of them. So I definitely have that. So I have found the white has sold the most for me. I mean, last year I should pull my Rooted Farmers numbers. Let me look. So I sold Sarah Bernhardt's. I sold 470 stems, and that was pretty much everything I had. I pretty much sold all my peonies. And then I sold a couple of mixed bunches. Like I had a couple florists that through, like, as long as I had them through the beginning of July, they would just take 20 or 25 stems, and they just wanted a mixed variety. So I sold 170 stems that way. So that would be like the Mons Julie, the Sarah Bernhardt's, and maybe like a couple of Kansas that I had, a few things, but mostly it was those two varieties because that's what I had. And then the Duchess de Numenors, I sold 150 of them, and that's all I had. And then the Mons Jules LE by themselves, I sold 20 stems. So like I said, I had more than that, but those were like a lot in those mixed bunches. I pulled up all my old orders. So in my initial planting in 2021, I planted Sarah Bernhardt's, Duchess de Numenors, Mons Julie, and Coral Charm. So the Coral Charm is the one I lost the most of in like to rot or whatever. I'm not exactly sure, but those are the ones that died. So I kind of have the least amount of Coral Charms. Everybody really does like that, but it's also like the least producing one for me. So I don't know if that's just me. If your Coral Charms produce just as much as your Sarah Bernhardt's and Duchess de Numenors, please let me know, because I don't know, maybe I need to do something different to them. Like I said, I have the most Sarah Bernhardt's, but they're not the easiest to sell. For me, the easiest to sell are the white. So I sold out of my Duchess de Numenors, or my white peonies, before they ever were in bloom, and I had at least orders for 400 of them. And I'm not joking. So, and I was like, I don't have any more white ones. Sorry. I don't have any more white ones. Sorry. I have pink ones. Like, I don't have any white ones. And everybody wanted white ones. I mean, the one florist for one wedding wanted 300 of them. And I was like, I have 130, I think. Like, because I had already sold a few. And so we pulled with some other local farmers. But yeah, so for this one wedding florist in June, I think it was the end of June, she wanted 300 white peonies. Now, she doesn't care that they're Duchess de Numenors. I think she would like them to be the same, to look the same. But if it was a different white variety, that would have been fine. She just wanted white. So, I mean, so much so that one of my florist that I work very closely with, she kept asking me for white peonies. I was like, I'm so sorry, but she had gotten some of my white peonies prior in the early season. She had gotten some, and she said to me, oh, well, later she was like, I can't believe I didn't get any more white peonies from you. I was like, I'm sorry, I sold out. So much so that she told me, I am ordering 100 white peonies for next spring. I get the white ones. I'll take 100 of them for June. And she'll totally deliver. I've worked with her for years. Like, I'm not concerned that she's not actually going to buy them all, but she just knows that she will have enough weddings and event work and funerals. She does a lot of funerals in 2025 in June that she will use 100 white peonies. So she had ordered other peonies from me, and she was the one that took 25 peonies every week for the duration of the season of peonies. So that was how much in demand my Duchess de Numenors were, and they are really a great peony, or they have been for me. So it's funny, looking back on my order from 2021, I realized that I also had Gardenia white ordered on that initial peony. I had 30 Gardenia white peonies ordered, and they got canceled due to lack of supply. So now I'm like, oh man, I could have had 30 more white, going into their 4th year peony plants. Oh man, I didn't even realize that. So I was actually trying to plant more white peonies that initial season. So that was my initial planting of 120 plants. So it was a combination of Sarah Bernhardt's, Duchess de Numenors, which are, okay, so Sarah Bernhardt's are pink. They're like the old 100-year-old plant, kind of industry standard, the big double kind of lighter pink peony. Duchess de Numenors are white. They're really amazing. They're really beautiful. They store well. So do the Sarah Bernhardt's. Mons Julie, which is like a bomb peony, they call it, and it's a darker pink than the Sarah Bernhardt's. It's also earlier. Sarah Bernhardt is later, my latest peony, actually. And then the Coral Charms, which are the earlier blooming single coral, kind of with that like yellow center, that's kind of classic as well. Coral Charms have not stored well for me. Okay, I'm not going to talk about storage in this video. That's going to be the next one, but just as I'm talking about varieties and how to choose a variety, Coral Charms just don't store as long. They just get kind of, I don't know if it's because they're a single variety, they're more fragile or what, but in my experience, they have not dry stored for as long as like a Sarah Bernhardt, for example. Okay, so then in 2022, I didn't have a ton of money because I had planted a peony, because I had put in my first woody planting, which I did a whole series on woody. So if you missed that, go check what I planted in 2022 in my first woody planting. You can check that out. I'll put the link in the description. And I also, but I wanted to add more peonies, and so I bought 50 peonies, and I bought them in this pack, which is a relatively cheap way to buy them from Ball again. And it was a pack of 50, but you got 10 of each Sarah Bernhardt, Duchess de Numenor, Mons Julie, Coral Charm, and Kansas. So you got 10 of each of those. So you got 50. So it's kind of a variety pack, I think is what they call it. So, and like I said, those are kind of the industry standard. So I had never grown Kansas before, so that was a new variety. So I only have 10 of those, and actually that's all I have of them. But those 50 plants are coming into their third season this spring, so I'm excited to have at least 10 more Duchess de Numenor plants. Oh, man. Looking back, I would have planted more white. However, I'm also selling all the other colors, so I don't know. I just, you do what you can and you grow the way you can. So I couldn't, have afforded to buy 350 peony plants after the first year. So you just kind of plant 100 or 150 or 50 at a time. 300 to 400 plants for a small farm is typically considered a good amount. And then from there you can see what your market is and what you're trying to do. So, and then in 2023, I bought more. I went a little, I bought 150 plants. I knew I really wanted to expand my peony plantings. So I bought, and then I had the knowledge that, hey, and also my flower farm had evolved. So I knew, okay, I'm selling to florists. These are the colors they want. This is what I want. This is what I need in peonies. So this is my third planting, and there's 150 plants of these. So I bought Festivia Maxima, which is a white kind of cream peony with like I'm pretty sure that one has the little pink, has like a little pink center. I bought more Mons Jules LE, and then I bought Solange, which is a blush, and then Gardenia White. Like I said, I had that on my initial order, which I didn't get it, but I did get it in 2023. So that's Gardenia White, which is a white. And then Soft Salmon Saucer, which is a single salmon color, kind of similar to the Coral Charm, but this is more salmony, right? So so that's what I planted in 2023. So last year they were itty bitty little plants, and I didn't harvest anything off of them. I sort of freaked out completely when my 2-year-old started breaking all the fronds off of my peony plants. So I might have lost 2 because she totally cut, she just broke them, every shoot off of my peony plant, and that will kill your peonies. So I don't know, because they got no photos, like she took every single little shoot off. So I probably lost those 2 plants. They're probably not going to come up this year. I'd be shocked. So anyway, I did stop her before she did more, but you gotta, that's just part of farming with 2-year-olds. They're gonna break things. They're gonna, kill your peony plant. That's what they're gonna do. So you just gotta roll with it. And you know what? I love my daughter more than my 2 peony plants. So at least she only got 2. I did want to say one thing here. Just when you're thinking about pricing, and I'm going to go into pricing, like how much I sell peonies for and what people sell them for in the next video. But in this video, I want to talk about the price of the bare root peony. Like I said earlier, most of these bare root peonies that I'm buying wholesale in quantities of 25 to 50 are between $5.50 to 10 to 12 would be pretty high. The Sarah Bernhardts are pretty cheap. They're like $5 or $6 a bare root. So you get a $5 or $6 bare root. You have to wait 2 to 3 years to get any kind of a profit from them. And in the meantime, you need to weed them, and you need to feed them, and you need to cut them back in the fall, and you need to fertilize them. I already said that. And you need to water them. But that's not terrible, because then you're going to get, 20, 30 plus stems off of it that you're going to sell every year for the rest of its life. Now, perennials definitely need to pull their weight, because they're there all season taking up real estate, right? So it's important for them to be very profitable. And especially like a peony never reflushes, right? It's a one and done. You get it one time in the spring and that's it. Okay, so they're going to give you a good profit. Now, there's this variety called etched salmon, and everyone is like, over the moon swooning about it. And I mean, from very reputable people that are concerned about profitability talk about etched salmon. So I just think it's important to just kind of pause when you think about etched salmon. So it's a double salmon peony. And I mean, I know from Ellen Frost from Local Color Flowers. She's a florist in Baltimore that only buys local flowers. She's kind of, she's very active in the AFCFG, and I've just listened to a lot of things that she's talked about. She has said that etched salmon is her favorite peony. The reason why farmers sell them, right? Like they are very sought after. So, but I just think you need to just pause and think about it. I also know, I live right next to Lori Hernandez from 3 Acre Farm. Like she's 3 miles away from me, and I know her, like I personally know her and talk to her, and she knows me, and she does a roadside stand. Her Instagram, she talked about etched salmon and are they really worth it, and are they worth all the hype, and she was like, yes, they are. And okay, so I'm not necessarily like totally against them. But I have never grown them, and here's why. Because wholesale etched salmon roots are like $25 to $30 a piece. And I thought about buying them. I even thought of like, well, I could just buy 10 of them or something. So I've definitely thought about buying them. I mean, I literally, was very close to buying them. So I'm not judging anybody that has etched salmon. But when you think about an etched salmon plant versus a Sarah Bernhardt or a Duchess de Numenor that's $6 a bare root as opposed to $25 a bare root, you just need to really pause and ask yourself, like, do I want to invest that much? Because you are not going to sell an etched salmon peony for 4 times what you sell a Sarah Bernhardt for. No one's going to buy an etched salmon for 4 times what you sell a Sarah Bernhardt for. If you're selling retail, you're going to be selling them the same price. Maybe if you're selling wholesale, you could sell them for 50 cents more, which is totally fine because the bare roots are more expensive and they're very sought after. Like, that's totally appropriate to sell them a little bit more. But you're never going to sell them for 4 times. If you sell a Sarah Bernhardt for $2.50, you are not going to sell an etched salmon for $10 because you've spent 4 times as much on the bare root. That's not how it works. So now that's not to say that over time you're not going to make up that $20 difference. So I'm not against them. I just think you really got to think, like, before you really spend some really big bucks, like thousands of dollars on etched salmon roots, is it worth it to you and to your farm? Now, I think I am at a point in my farm where I could potentially buy some of them, and I have enough revenue and income to make those kind of decisions about profitability and adding them to my farm. I actually didn't feel that way in 2023. I was like, nope, it's not worth it to me. I'm not going to spend $250 on 10 bare roots when I could get 40. Or 35. So now going forward, that might change, but I just think, okay, let's all just be smart and profitable and make sure you have the market for it. I would not invest your first year into etched salmon, and don't feel like you need to spend big bucks on bare roots. And that's wholesale pricing. You buy an etched salmon retail, a plant is like $80 or more, like $100 for one peony bush. I mean, it's wild. So that's what I have to say about that. They will never give you the return on the initial investment. So that's all I have on peonies for today. In the next video, I'm going to talk about how to harvest them and storing them. But I have one big announcement that I have not announced here on YouTube. If you're on my email list, you know this, but I have been working very, very, very hard on something for you all. And it is a course about selling flowers to florists. That's all that the course is about. It's going to be very affordable. You will make up your sale. You will make up what you pay for it in your very first florist sale. It's not going to be $1,000. And if you sign up for my email list, you will get not only get a coupon for it, but you'll also be all in the know about when it comes out. It's going to come out in February, and which is this month, and I have a lot of work to do on it, and I've put a lot of hours into it, and I've gotten a lot of great feedback about it. So please download those links for selling flowers to florists, because that will get you on my email list, and then you'll know everything about when the course is coming out and what it's about, and be all in the know about that as well. And I really would love your feedback. So I'm still creating it, so if you have some burning question, please email me. I have definitely added material to the course, like, oh yeah, that's totally a great idea, I need to put that in the course. So I definitely am taking people's feedback seriously, and you think you've considered everything, and sometimes you forget things. So please sign up for my email list so you won't miss that, and we'll see you next time when we finish talking about peonies. Have a great day. Why are you out here barefoot, child?
Not sure. Okay, guys, ready to go.
Hang on.